There's an entire section of gaming's digital graveyard devoted to canceled superhero games, filled with projects that could have been contenders or, at the very least, would have given comic book fans everywhere the chance to spend time with characters that still haven't gotten a proper video game adaptation to this day. In this video, we will look at what could have been and 8 of the most notable superhero games that should never have been canceled. Without any further delay, let's get into the video. Starting off the list, we have Superman 64. Apologies for the confusing title, but it's pretty hard to talk about this game without eventually getting around to the fact that it was essentially supposed to be the PS1 port of the infamously bad Superman 64. However, because the PS1 couldn't quite handle some of the free-roaming mechanics featured in the N64 game, this port was essentially redesigned by developer Blue Sky Software to be its own thing. Do you know what's really funny? A recently leaked prototype of this canceled game suggests that it actually might have been kind of fun. At the very least, this port's emphasis on linear combat looks a lot more enjoyable than whatever Superman 64 was going for. In a world where most Superman games are bad, it's a shame this one didn't get the chance to at least be decent. Next up, we have The Flash. The rise of the open world genre has also meant the rise of superhero fans, wondering why more game developers just don't put their favorite characters in an open world playground. That formula has certainly worked numerous times in the past, and it could have also worked for this Flash game that developer Brash Entertainment worked on starting in the mid-2000s. While Brash went under in 2008, they took this potentially amazing project with them. Reports about this game's development, as well as some early test footage, suggest it was an appropriately fast-paced open-world epic that went deep into the Flash's lore and even featured a kind of Sunset Overdrive-style navigation system that would have let the Flash pull off elaborate tricks. Someone really needs to mine this project for its best ideas and revive them in some form. The next game on our list that should never have been canceled is Ghost Rider. In the late 90s, Neversoft Entertainment, who also are the developers of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, started working on a Ghost Rider action and adventure game that combined elements of 2D and 3D design. It was basically a Castlevania-style action game from the studio that eventually brought us that amazing PS1 Spider-Man title. The only known footage of this title is pretty rough, but it certainly looked promising. In fact, this is another one of those instances where the game's eventual cancellation has nothing to do with how good it was. Ghost Rider was supposed to be published by Crystal Dynamics, but reports indicate that Crystal Dynamics decided to get out of publishing before the game could be completed. Neversoft apparently tried to approach them to work out a new deal, but rumors had it that the company just wasn't interested in funding a 2D action game at that time. Next is Daredevil. It's hardly a surprise that Daredevil is arguably the most talked about canceled superhero game of all time. After all, an open-world Daredevil game that properly utilizes the character's abilities while diving deep into his comic book lore is something a lot of fans would probably still play today. With this one, though, the story isn't so much that it was canceled, but rather that the project made it as far as it did. Daredevil's life is a mixture of joy and tragedy. Matt Murdock's story began with his father, Jonathan Battlejack Murdock, raised his children Matt and Mike alone, claiming that Matt's mother had died. Jack wanted his kids to be more successful than he was. This made Matt realize the need to continue studying instead of working out with other kids. Jack hoped he and Matt would become doctors or lawyers, rather than an uneducated pug like him. This led to neighborhood kids harassing the coward Matt as the adventurer, while his twin brother came to his aid. Matt took out his frustrations by secretly working out at his father's gym. One day, Matt saw a blind man walking towards an oncoming truck. Matt pushed the man out of the way. The truck crashed and a radioactive isotope leaked out, hitting Matt in the face and blinding him. While recovering in the hospital, Matt found that his hearing, smell, taste, and touch had improved to a superhuman degree. He also developed a radar sense that formed a mental picture of his surroundings. Reports about this game's development suggest that it wasn't only an overly ambitious technical nightmare, but that the stress of working on this title led to a sharp decline in morale at developer 5000 Foot Inc.'s offices, and may have even resulted in a rise in substance abuse issues among the studio's employees. Marvel eventually decided to pull their support support for this one due to a litany of problems and disagreements. Next in our list is X-Woman, the Sinister Virus. As the name suggests, X-Women was based on the idea that all the male X-Men team members have been incapacitated by the Genesis virus. It's not only an interesting concept that would have put characters like Storm and Jean Grey in the spotlight, but the project was even being developed by Clockwork Tortoise, the studio behind the excellent Sega Genesis version of The Adventures of Batman and Robin. This game seemingly had a lot going for it, so why was it canceled? Well, according to those who worked on the project in the late 90s, X-Women got off to a rough start that it never really recovered from. A combination of technical shortcomings, studio drama, and Sega's desire to start moving away from the 16-bit era pretty much doomed this game before it ever had a chance to become more than some vague ideas. What about Superman, Blue Steel? Throughout the dodgy history of Superman video games, most fans of the character have cried out for an open-world Superman title that captures the awesome potential of the character's abilities without reducing Superman to a wrecking ball. Well, developer Factor 5 Superman Blue Steel was supposed to be that game. In fact, Blue Steel lead designer Salvatrix recently shared new details about the game via Twitter that all confirmed reports people had been hearing for years regarding this project's potential. Unfortunately, she also confirmed that this game's cancellation ultimately came down to the market crash that hit at the time and how it left the team without the resources and support they needed to complete their vision. The next game in our list is The Avengers. While The Avengers received a next-gen game release from Square Enix in 2020, the last time players saw an Avengers-specific release was a canceled first-person fighter that would have allowed players to play their favorite Marvel Avengers in-game for 4 players to become a game as they face off against the Skrulls during a plot similar to a Secret Invasion. The game was developed by THQ and is slated for co-release with the Avengers movie, and the developers even brought in Secret Invasion writer Brian Michael Bendis to help with the script. Unfortunately, THQ's financial problems and Marvel's reluctance to continue pulling the game led to its cancellation, which later led to the disappointing Marvel Avengers Battle for Earth. In the game, Steve Rogers was a fragile boy who had a big dream during World War II to serve the United States in the fight against the Nazis. But his fragile health would be an eternal barrier if the boy didn't participate in an experiment that could transform him into a new man. Rogers was vaccinated with super soldier serum and gained muscle and size almost immediately. Unfortunately, plans to create an army of super soldiers went awry when a bomb attack hit the serum's creator, Dr. Erskine, murdered, and Rogers the only copy of Project Rebirth left behind. Thanks to his good physical condition and intensive training, Rogers was transformed by the United States government into Captain America, a masked hero who would serve as a patriotic inspiration for Uncle Sam's soldiers. Unfortunately, on a mission against Baron Zemo, Bucky was killed in an explosion and Captain America was presumed dead when, in fact, he was frozen and remained in suspended animation. After decades, he was found by the Avengers, the leading team of heroes in the Marvel Universe, and became one of their core members and even team leaders on numerous occasions. Wrapping it up, Justice League, Mortal. Remember that Justice League movie George Miller was supposed to direct that was ultimately canceled due to budget concerns? Well, it turns out the developer Double Helix once worked on a loose video game adaptation of tie-in to that film. It was going to be a third-person action game with a DMC-like combo system that, you guessed it, was canceled around the same time as the George Miller Justice League movie. What's really interesting about this one, though, is that elements of this project were eventually spun off into the Green Lantern Rise of the Manhunters game. While that title offers a rough look at what this one could have been, reports suggest Justice League Mortal was a much larger and more ambitious game. That's all we have for this video. Thanks for watching. If you like what you see, please give us a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to see more videos like this, and we'll see you next time.